And good morning, everybody. We are live. Congratulations. You made it through the week. Another week of food safety, quality, amazing foods that all of us enjoy every single day of the week. And if nobody else tells you, Neil and I are going to tell you here today, you did a great job. Thanks a lot. We really appreciate all you do for us and our families. If you're new to the chat, welcome. This is the Food Safety Chat Live, and every Friday at this time, 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, we live stream on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter, and we have a conversation, and that's key. We have a conversation around a food safety topic, and I bring in an amazing guest to talk with me about that, and the most important part of this conversation is you. We want to hear from you and what you think about these particular topics, because food safety, as we all know, not a point of competition. We're all working in the food industry, and the consumers don't care. They don't care what company we work for. All they want to make sure is that we have safe food and they can feed it safely to their children. So anything that we can share on different topics, because stuff is changing all the time, is beneficial to us all. So I'm very happy to have Neil on. So gosh, Neil, we've been trying to get together. He's so busy trying to get Neil on this chat forever. And I think, Neil, it's part of what food safety is our network. And so you and I met through Cara over at Chem Station, and it's just kind of those connections, and it's how your network grows. And as I've learned more about you and what you do, it's really amazing. So first off, thanks for all you do.
No, thank you very much. No, it's as you said, networking is massive, and it's who we know from that aspect, and how do we build that network, and we're all once removed from each other. I was just at a customer and talking, and it's like, oh, do you know this person? I was like, yeah, I know them, and they're like, oh, we're good friends, and it's like, oh, so now all of a sudden we're all together. So
Yeah, well, and that's what's great about it is once you connect that and you get that, oh no, yeah, Bryan, Bryan's a good dude. He knows what he's
yeah,
talking about. And then it's like you've known each other forever, isn't it?
yeah, absolutely. So uh, and
So
I
Neil is president and founder of Bogart Food Safety and Sanitation Associates. And so that second part, I think, is so important, because so many times, Neil, sanitation is absolutely critical in plants. And as we talk about a lot of times with quality, if you're doing your job right, nobody notices. And it's 100% true with sanitation, right? It's just expected that at the end of the sanitation shift that everything's clean and sparkly and safe for manufacture, and it just happens magically, and that is far from the truth.
yeah, and it's not a lot of people enjoy sanitation, so I'm one of those weird ones that enjoys it. I've been raised in it my whole life from my father. My father's a food scientist. My wife's a food scientist. I'm a food scientist. But my father worked in sanitation almost his whole career. So
Mhm.
I've been going in plants forever, and I love the fascination of understanding microorganisms in different types of soils, and how do we eliminate them. What
Mhm.
are different ways we can eliminate them? Is there a new way we can try to find to handle it? Especially when you start getting into like environmental pathogens and all that. uh, Enjoy it. It's almost like being a detective,
Mhm.
and you're going through, and it's trying to solve the case, and what tools can you utilize. And it's amazing, a lot of the same tools that we're using are the same stuff that crime scene investigators use, just to diagnose, what's the issue.
That's a great analogy. I love that.
Yeah.
And so if there's an issue in the plant that I'm investigating as the quality manager, almost every single time the sanitation manager was the first person I speak with. Right? It's like, hey, how did things go last night? Anything wrong? Did you notice this? Right? That's always where the investigation starts. So as people are coming in here for the chat, so Ryan, good morning, Annie. So it looks like you have a fan, Neil. Stephanie over in Germany, always great to see her, and Sean and Austin. And so as we're doing here, this is part of our tradition on the chat, is let us know where in the world you're at. I'm in Loveland, Colorado. Austin's just down the road from me. And it's kind of a drizzly, we got some snow yesterday. We got
Oh,
enough to cover the grass, which is actually pretty awesome, because we put down fertilizer last weekend. Everything's starting to green up here in Colorado, so spring is arriving. Where are you at, Neil?
I'm in just out of Birmingham, Alabama, and I hate to say it's supposed to be, I think, about 85 today. So there's a reason why I live down here. But no, I've lived all over the country, and I have fallen in love with Alabama, and I love the weather down here. Outside of the tornadoes and the hurricanes and all that, but I like the warmth absolutely.
Yeah, I mean,
And
there's one thing that you figure out is pick your poison. There's nowhere that's perfect for sure. Is
no,
here in Colorado, forest fires, and I have
Mhm.
pictures from my house outside where at night when we had those really bad forest fires a few years ago, where you could see the fires, and it's like, uh-oh, right? So you're just outside of the evacuation zone, and you're like, I hope it doesn't go this way.
Yeah,
So those things are always a little scary for sure. Um, so as everybody knows on the chat, who's a regular. Join us for a sip of your favorite beverage. Cheers, everyone.
cheers.
Good cup of coffee on a cold morning is always nice. So let's dive in here because today's topic is something, and Neil and I were chit-chatting here before we went live. I think one of the keys to being successful, I don't care what you do. One of the things for being successful in life is being curious and constantly learning. And when you see these really amazing people in their 90s and 100s, that seems to be a key attribute. You'll see the people like the widowed grandma who picks up weightlifting at 85 years old, or marathon runners at 100, and you see these videos of sprints, like 100-yard dashes with these guys, and you're like, I don't think I could do that. And it's always inspirational. And I think that continuous learning piece of it is something that we all need to focus on.
Yeah, it's being curious.
Yeah.
It's actually one of the reasons why you know I'm where I'm at today.
Mm.
Because I've always been curious. I've always wondered why. I mean, I remember going back even to when I was growing up, and I was just up seeing some of my aunts and uncles over the weekend, and my aunt goes, "I remember you at your grandpa's house taking apart the phone because you wanted to know how it worked." And so, in that tinkering, that curiosity has led into my career. And it's like, how do these things work? How does this
Yeah.
work? What are some new things? What are some because there's not a lot of new stuff, especially like in sanitation. Chemistry is
Mhm.
kind of like stagnant. We've kind of hit the wall on the advancements of sanitation from a chemical standpoint. So what's the next thing that's going to take us into maintaining our plants in a safe manner to produce food in a clean, safe manner? And
Yeah.
so I'm always curious. Okay, what's those next things that are going to take us there?
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned taking apart the phone. I did that too. And so I remember, so for the younger people on our chat here today, they're going to be like, "What?" But
Yeah,
guess what, everybody? You used to have phones on the wall in your house,
yeah,
and your friends who were fancy had a phone with a really long cord, so you could like kind of drag it into the other room and stuff like this. But
yeah,
if you take off the part you would speak into on the phone that you're holding to your head, there was a diaphragm type dish on there that met with the contacts in the phone. And so one day I took that out, went to my friend's house, and mom said, be home by 5. And so I called back home, and mom's like, hello. I'm like, hi, mom, this is Brian. I can't hear you talk because I took the piece out of the phone. So I'm just letting you know that I'm going to stay here an extra hour longer. Bye.
and how did that turn out for you?
Yeah, I think you can kind of imagine. Yeah.
Yeah.
So mom was not too happy with me.
Oh, yeah. No, it's again, as we keep moving forward and trying to learn these new things, just that curiosity of what's next, and that's the fun
Mhm.
part of what we do. Because if you can get stagnant in your job, you're getting blinders. You're so buried into what you do, and it's taking that time. And each day I try to take at least a half an hour every morning before I really dive into everything, and I'll just start combing the internet. What's
Yeah.
something different? Start just researching stuff, and just to kind of open up my mind to what's a new potential that maybe a rabbit hole I can start working down
Yeah.
to go find something new.
Exactly. And um, I think that really kind of ties in really nicely with our topic today is this continuous improvement piece of it around AI. And that's what our talk is going to be about here today. But really, I think part of this is, and that's a good point, Neil, around that stagnation piece of things. And around that stagnation, one of the things that we get a lot of criticism here in the food industry for is recalls, because every single year recalls remain at about the same level, and it's always the top three reasons. So pathogens, Listeria and Salmonella. Sometimes, E. coli will creep in there, foreign material,
Mm-hmm.
and allergens. And all three of those are those are all linked in to sanitation. And you hear these industries, retailers and things like this, and regulatory criticizing us, saying, come on, guys, why do we keep having these recalls? Why can't we get these numbers down?
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of ways, there's almost an authoritarian crackdown. It's like, okay, well, fine. If you can't manage it, we'll manage it for you.
Right.
So on the retail side, we'll create GFSI in this new standard to try and enforce these things. FDA says, okay, we're going to, put a whole bunch of new guidance documents and regulations on top of you, but yet there it sits. So I think the real answer on it belongs to us, right?
Yeah.
The food manufacturers, we're the ones who need to get the recalls lower. So part of that, and I'll put the link in here for this article that I found that kind of set the groundwork for what Neil and I are talking about here today around AI and how we can use these type of tools to improve. And so I think we got some really cool stuff to talk about here. But before we dive into the AI stuff, I kind of wanted to do a little background on if you're looking in a plant and you're looking to keep things from happening, you always have to remember a couple of core things. In my book, which is not on the table here today, I talk about this because you always have to think about in terms of the manufacturing and what I call the core process, Neil. So I don't care what you make, candy, bread, cheese, it doesn't matter. You have 4 core components in your manufacturing process. Receiving, right? You bring stuff in. Processing, you do something to that stuff. Packaging, and then shipping and warehousing.
Yep.
And that's how you make money. That's why we all have jobs. That's how we get paid. It's how the consumers, and you need to always remember that core process has to function. And if you're working in quality or maintenance or sanitation or HR or management in the plant, you're all there to support that core process. Right. Everything that we do is there to make sure that process works smoothly. So the better you control that process, the better you understand it, and react to issues as soon as possible when they happen, the better off you're going to be. Because we all hear this in quality, right? So the sooner you catch that issue earlier in the process, the less it costs your company, right? It's a lot easier to reject materials at the door than it is to throw away product sitting in the warehouse, right? So times 10, times 10, times 10, costs add up really quick. So I think in a lot of ways, AI can help us with this if we understand that base.
Yep. And we have to remember who our customer is, and I've been there and on management side. So it's like, who is my customer? My customer is those categories of keeping those frontline employees trained with the supplies they need, the tools they need, everything they need to be successful. If I don't supply them with that, it's not their fault that something failed. It's management's fault. And so, yes, everything that we can do to support our customer, who are them that are doing it, then that's the most important thing that we can do in our job.
Absolutely. And in those 4 different core process steps, the relationship that's the most important in that process is the supervisor and his team. That's where everything that we want to get done happens.
Yep.
If you're having problems with employees not washing their hands properly, it's not you as the quality person being the policeman out there scolding everybody to wash their hands. It's the supervisor. And once you figure that out, number one, your life gets a lot easier because you're putting responsibility where it belongs. And you have that team approach to managing these activities that you're looking for. Because a lot of times you hear that, Neil, and this is something that I always chafe against in our industry is, quality being viewed as the policeman. Oh, we had a quality issue in the plant. What the hell are you talking about? I didn't make the product. You made bad product, right? So let's figure out what happened and I'll help you fix it as a supporter of the core process.
Yeah, but that can also stem, and I did this earlier in my career. It was Neil's program. It was the quality's program, because back in the day, quality wrote everything. They controlled all that until we started really breaking down the barriers and getting into culture and understanding how all this relates across the board. And again, I made that mistake as a younger part of my career is, I kept hearing in my company, "Oh, that's Neil's program,"
Mhm.
and it's like, well, that's a problem because I created that problem. How do I
Right.
fix it? And until we can break down those barriers and make it our program, you can have all the programs you want, beautiful written programs, but
Mhm.
until it becomes ours, it's not going to be successful.
Right. And on that side, there's two key points for that. Number one is I refer to that as Moses coming down from the mountain, right? We write these documents and we bring down the tablets with all the commandments of what we want everybody to do, and we bestow them upon everyone, and everybody goes, "What? No, that's not how we," right? And then they promptly get ignored. And a lot of times, the response that we have as quality people is, "Okay, fine, I'll write more," and that just makes it worse.
Yeah.
And I think, and this is you're bringing up here, Neil, exactly that key characteristic which makes us who we are, and that's this really strong moral foundation in what we do. Right? We have a very strong sense of what's right and wrong, good and bad, pass and fail, and we're the guardians of those standards for the consumers, and we view that personally,
Oh,
and we
absolutely.
take that on. And I think a lot of times people are more than happy to allow us to do that, and if you do it, man, it's you got a tough road ahead if you don't build out that teamwork part of it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it affects you. I mean, it's mentally, physically. It can make you sick. I mean, again, younger in my career, I put so much of it on myself
Huh.
that, like, I mean, I even ended up in the hospital because I got wore down so much. And
Yeah,
it's like, you just have to. There's a passion. All of it. This is not an easy job by no means, and you have to love it to do it. It's not something that a lot of people just choose to go into. It's
yeah,
just like sanitation. You have to love sanitation. And there's a few of us weirdos out there like myself that love sanitation and food safety. And it's just there's that passion can take over, and you take it, you start taking it personal, and you can't, and you have to shelf that. And it's like it's us, it's not me taking
right.
this on, because it can wear you out, definitely.
Yep, 100%. And so with that, we wanted to kind of hopefully here on our chat here today is number one, let you realize that you need to focus on activities from this team standpoint and bring information to the rest of your team so that you can work on it
Yes.
together. And this big thing that's out here right now is artificial intelligence. We see it everywhere. I use it. You use it. I use a program called otter.ai to help me transcribe these chats to put in the database. And is it perfect? No, it's probably 95% there. So I still have to go back through it and correct things because the AI doesn't know what HACCP is. And it's often hilarious the words it tries to put in there for HACCP, right? It's just like, what? No, what? How did you come up with that? Which is always kind of funny. But so how are you using AI on a regular basis, Neil?
Yeah, no, it's so when it started coming out, I've got two younger daughters, and they're hitting into the teen years, and we just started playing with it, trying to
Right.
understand how to use it. Number one, because it's not easy to use in the beginning until you really start understanding how to set it up, how to ask it questions, and all that. Because when we first started, it was like you start asking it questions, and it'll just start spitting out whatever. And
Mhm.
it's like, oh well, this is kind of worthless. But once you see it, I mean, because it's just spitting out whatever it finds. But
Yeah.
no, I've used it to help write articles, help to write programs, and again, it's not 100%. I mean, can it start the process? Yes. Can it get something going? I've even had it write a PowerPoint presentation. But
Oh,
what it did is it set up the core basis, and then I took and filled in all the rest of my knowledge to it. So it did maybe 50% of the core, you know, here's a nice outline. So
ah,
I didn't have to go through and build out an outline and all that stuff which you normally build out in the beginning. And it started me through the process, and it saved me about 50% of my time of building out a PowerPoint. So but again, it's just understanding, how do you ask it these questions to set it up for that. Um,
gotcha.
and
And I think that's key.
and then I started. So last year, I know at IEFP, I started talking to individuals about. I was at the HACCP PDG meeting, and I said, y'all need to be prepared because people are going to start writing their HACCP programs with AI. And they're like, what are you talking about? I can't write a HACCP plan. I'm like, it can actually get fairly close if you know how to ask it.
Hmm.
And so, but again, and my biggest fear is, especially for those small companies who don't have the expertise on staff. My biggest fear is they're going to utilize AI and take it for granted of whatever it spits out is the program, right?
Right.
Because they don't know any better. But if utilized properly, could it do, 60% of writing the HACCP plan for them? Absolutely. But then it's getting with an expert. So now you're not having to pay a consultant, for 100% of the development. Maybe you're only having to pay a consultant for 40% of the development of the HACCP plan and save your
Hmm.
company some money, and
Yeah.
also, um, build out your plan a
Yeah, it's
little
a good
bit
point.
faster.
Yeah. Yeah. So it can get you the outline. So, okay, here's how we're defining our preventive controls. Here's our supplier program, et cetera. Okay, consultant, what I really need help on is making sure that my hazard analysis is correct. Because, that if FDA is coming in to visit you, that's right. That's what they're zeroing in on is your hazard analysis. So that's where I need to make doubly sure that everything is looking good.
Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely.
And I think that's a good point, and you're bringing up some really valuable lessons. I think around this is I kind of refer to this as the spaghetti factory menu. Right? If people are giving an overwhelming amount of choices, right? Because anybody's been to spaghetti factory, right? The menu's this thick, 50 pages of things.
Yeah,
You end up picking nothing because there's just too many options, and
right.
it's kind of what's going on right now with AI. There's just so much stuff going out there. We hear it all the time. We don't know where to start. So we wanted to give everybody some ideas on how to start with AI and looking at these type of things. And so you don't have to become an expert overnight. When you look back on your career, Neil, right? When we were newbies, we didn't know anything, right? And so
No.
you have to start somewhere and start learning. And I think part of this is one of the main lessons I think for this is don't try all these cliches. Don't try to eat the elephant in one bite type thing. Bite off small chunks. What are some of those things? And this is what got me thinking about this for our chat when we were talking earlier. Is what are things in the plant that are repetitive? What are things that people hate to do? What are things where people are on the line just standing there watching stuff? And so as you kind of go through that core process, you get some good ideas around this. And in industries where you're doing, let's say, photo sorting and stuff like this, which has been around for a while, so peanuts or tomatoes or whatever, you have these super fast machines or products are shooting through these things, and the computer is deciding what's good, what's bad, what's damaged, these type of things. And that's a good example of how you can use AI in incoming inspections. So
Yep.
how can you utilize that type of technology to really hone in on that?
No, and so foreign material,
Yeah.
and I take that back into foreign. You have visual inspection. A lot of your X-ray systems now, all of them are using AI as part of it, and you actually train the X-rays on what to look for and what to accept and what to reject. And one of the problems I ran into with one customer here recently is the AI analysis of what was going through the X-ray was so tight down to exactly what they were looking for. It forgot another section of stuff to look for. So they even
Mhm.
sent through, so they had it looking for specific pieces of stuff. But then they sent through a metal detectable pin and it didn't pick it up through the
Uh-huh.
X-ray, which is massive, right? And
Yeah.
because it was the AI wasn't spanned enough, and I talk about spanning, so spanning the algorithm far enough that it was so scoped in on exactly what it was looking for, they forgot about the rest of the big picture. And that was an
Uh-huh.
interesting breakthrough. I was like, holy cow, okay, so you really have to take a look at the full versus just really honing it down in. There's another system out there. So in the dairy industry, we use it to look at homogenization efficiency, and it will look for at the fat globule sizes. Well,
Mhm.
it will only look for the fat globule sizes in the range it's supposed to be in. But then the fat globules, if they're outside that range, it doesn't look at those. So it'll say, okay, this is good, but yet we're having cream plugs on our milk.
Hmm.
And sorry, I started off as a dairy person in my career, so I love dairy. And so, but and it won't look at those, and so we can still have fat plugs. And it's like, well, it said we were fine. Well, come to find out, it's spanned only to look for specific data, and it's not looking outside. I hate the term outside the box. It's not
Mhm.
looking at the full picture of it. So that's one of the things we have to take back and look at from that.
Right. I think I kind of, so Austin had a question, I think, which kind of falls into this as well, is how do you use AI to interpret large data sets? Any thoughts around that, Neil?
Yeah, no, I think it's being used more and more for large data sets because we're really good, especially in quality, at producing a lot of data.
Mm.
And one of the reasons why, as a consultant, I'm usually going in is because people haven't looked at their data. 9 times out of 10, their data will tell them they've had a problem, and they've had a problem for a long time. And that's one of the first things I'll ask for is send me the data before I even come out to your facility because I want to start digesting it. And
Uh,
there's little you have AI now. And I haven't done it yet. I've just started learning about this. Is there's even AI attachments you can put into Excel to help uh, data mine an Excel spreadsheet for you, and it will even create charts for you. Like this is what you tell it to create a specific style chart, and it'll create it. So I'm just getting ready to start playing with this because I just learned about it, and I'm like, holy cow!
hmm.
I've set many hours sitting there digesting data on Excel spreadsheets, and it's like now I've got an AI system who can help me do all that. So,
Yeah.
but we produce a ton of data and we're not good at analyzing it, setting down,
Mhm.
bringing it down. And sometimes I'm like, you're producing too much data because it's analysis by paralysis.
Right.
But
Exactly.
yeah, so look at there's a lot of new stuff coming out, and like I said, I just learned about it yesterday about the Excel attachment, and I'm like, holy cow! I
Yeah.
don't even know the name of it yet. I just started reading about it, so I'm going to start googling, and now I'm going down that rabbit hole of okay, I'm going to find an AI who can help me with Excel.
Yeah. And really, I think, my kind of input on that as well too for Austin is anytime you have, like we were talking about, repetitive activities with lots of information flowing through, and any type of thing that people aren't looking closely at. So, I mean, the big example for me would be, let's say, uh, consumer complaints.
Mm,
If you're in a large company, people are giving you their opinion on different things all the time. And it kind of gets back to what we were talking about with these online AIs that are looking for particular things. If you're working in quality, and particularly food safety, right? You're doing this.
yep.
You're doing the I'm keeping an eye out for food safety issues. I'm looking for these comments coming back from consumers that say, "Hey, I ate your product and it made me sick." Oh, right. That's what we're trained to do as food safety professionals is look for those. But that's kind of the end point. What's that information earlier that could help you identify that trend? And if you're in a large company with thousands of, I mean, look at all the different avenues that people have now. So going on Twitter and making comments about product, and Facebook, and contact to the company. There's just it's a deluge of information from the consumers that are coming in. Way too much for us to analyze as an individual.
Mhm.
That's a perfect application of AI. What do the consumers think of these products? What do they think of this new product launch? What are the leading indicators that I need to be looking out for? We see this a lot in our industries as well. It's product abuse. And so you ship out your product, the carrier freezes it because they stood it too close to the reefer in the front of the truck. And now you're getting complaints. In the past, you had a really hard time finding that stuff.
Mhm.
And now maybe you can use AI to help identify that trend.
Absolutely. And then food fraud.
Oh,
Looking at yeah, I mean, look at there's a few companies out there using AI for food fraud that you can see out there. Like, and I don't know if we can give out the names or not, but there's a lot of because again, digesting all this data from around the world, trying to collect as much data as we can to start. Okay, did we have shortages on? Is there a weather issue going to cause an issue with now this crop is going to be not as productive, but
right.
yet we still have this demand. Well, the demand is still really pulling through, and all of a sudden we're still producing the same amount. Well, how are you still producing the same amount when the crops are getting damaged? So look
Mm,
at coffee beans. Coffee beans are very susceptible to weather patterns and stuff like that. I used to work in the coffee industry,
yeah.
and so we had people who literally just sat there watching weather, looking at politics, weather, because politics was another thing. There's one large country that decided that we don't want to sell our coffee beans this year. We're just going to hoard them, and it spiked coffee prices
Oh,
artificially for the year. So it was just like all these different, political atmospheres, weather, all this stuff that we could start programming AI to monitor to really understand. Okay, are we going to have a situation happen, or is there going to be
yeah.
price spikes or shortages, or is the potential for food fraud going to be increased for this spice or whatever because
Mhm.
of all these different things?
Oh, man, if I'm working in procurement,
Oh,
oh, oh my goodness, that's a huge. I mean, because just look at things like the war in Ukraine.
yeah,
Uh, did I know before that happened that most of the sunflower oil in the world comes from Ukraine? No. Do I
no,
know it now? Yeah, oh yeah, right. And so do all the food fraudsters out there too,
yep,
right? So
yep.
all of a sudden, your procurement group is scrambling to buy sunflower oil. There's none out there. To your point, prices spike. Now all
Hmm.
of a sudden, the food fraud people go, "Oh, I can make some money here," right?
Yep.
And anytime you can get ahead of that curve, it's only wow. The procurement side is huge, and the fraud side.
Yep.
The other big example is anytime you have a concentrated market like that sunflower oil. The other big one is vanilla. Right?
Oh,
Most of the vanilla comes from Madagascar, and there was a number of years ago a big storm that went through and wiped out a big chunk of the vanilla crop, and prices just went through the roof, and fraud was rampant in
yeah.
vanilla.
Well, and olive oil. I mean, that was neat. I got to join an olive oil panel, and we went through and tasted them. And I was a chef also, so I've been
Uh-huh.
around food. I'm certified chef, and so I've used olive oil for years. And I was sitting there going, after I did the panel, I'm like, I've never really truly seen true olive oil now until now. And so I went over to Spain and I had fresh olive oil over there, and it was like I've never had anything like this before in my life,
Oh,
and
yeah,
it's
back to
phenomenal.
the
So,
cheese example. There's nothing better than like fresh mozzarella right off the line.
oh,
So good. Let's see,
or
Annie had a question here. Let's see. So, are there any AI platforms that you have worked with that you can recommend for different situations? I am using ChatGPT. Ah, boy, good timing on this, Annie.
yeah.
To help prepare the outlines of programs or policies and then tailor for organizations. What do you find works well with identifying trends?
Yeah, so ChatGPT is pretty good. Again, it's how you ask the question. You have to first set you actually have to train ChatGPT first to work for you. So think of it like you've hired somebody in on your staff to do a specific job, and you've developed their work instructions. What do you their deliverables and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So you're asking somebody to come in and do this job. So you kind of have to say, okay, Chat GPT, I'm basically hiring you to do this job. So
Uh-huh.
we can even bring one up here, Brian, if you want to pull over the screen real
Yeah.
quick. I played around this morning and put a few different representations together. And I don't know if you can see. Yep, you can see my
Yep,
cursor
you're
here.
up there.
So act as a food safety expert with experience in HACCP and hazard analysis. So I first sat down and said, okay, I've hired you as my HACCP and hazard analysis expert in my company. Now it will spit out usually, okay, absolutely. And this is kind of the stuff that, first it's essential to understand. This is kind of, they've wrote their job description now. They have to understand all these different things.
Ah.
Um, first conducting hazard analysis, determining critical control points, establish critical limits, monitor CCPs, so on and so forth, the 7 steps, right?
Mhm.
But then what are the practical applications? Training, risk assessments, continuous improvement, collaboration, which is also very important. So then I said, what are the hazards and critical control points for processing fluid milk through the HTST? So again, just being an old dairy guy, I just asked some dairy questions.
Yep.
And
So,
so,
so for people who aren't familiar with the lingo, so
yep,
HTST stands for high temperature short time. That's the
yep.
pasteurizer.
And it actually spells that out right here. So processing fluid milk through high temperature, short time pasteurization. So temperature involves several potential hazards. And then it goes into what are some of the potential hazards. It's not in great detail. It's spelled out salmonella, Escherichia coli, listeria. There's other ones I would be concerned about too, but then it goes into chemical hazards. If you had chemicals left over from improper cleaning, physical hazards, again, from packaging material and stuff like that. And
Cool.
then it goes into the CCPs. So I wasn't really excited about the spit out on this one. So it didn't really get as detailed on this one. So I went through and started asking it some other questions, develop a CCP hazard analysis for fluid milk HTSE process that I can copy and paste into a Word document. You can actually tell it to
Oh.
build a full template for you that you can pull out and pull over into a Word document. So again, it's going to do what you tell it to do, but you first have to set it up. So it went in. So here's a HACCP plan for an HTST. So the hazard analysis, the microbiological side. Here's the potential sources for the micro. Here's the control measures. Here's the critical control points. Now, again, if you're a dairy person, you're not going to call raw milk reception a critical control point. It
Mm.
would be a control point, not a critical control point. So you'd
Right.
be concerned about the quality of the milk coming in. So this is where your expertise. So again, it started setting up a core base, but this is now where your expertise would come in with an expert saying, okay, I'm not going to set up raw milk as a CCP. That's ridiculous. We can have it as a CP control point and have, like DMC as a control, freezing point, acid degree value, and stuff like that as some of our control points of will we reject the milk or receive it. And it keeps going through all the way through. Here's the pasteurization, but it didn't give the temperature and times and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
I actually started changing here. And so I came over here, and I apologize for this. It doesn't like to stay at the top. So close your eyes for a second. Okay, there you go.
All right.
So then I changed it up and said, act as a food safety expert with experience in HARP C and hazard analysis.
Ah.
And so just kind of comparing the two differences of HACCP versus HARP C. So now I said, okay, now you're my HARP C and hazard analysis expert. Absolutely. And then develop a HARP C hazard analysis plan for fluid milk HTSD process that I can copy and paste into a Word document. Certainly. So
Zoop.
Zoop, it got more detailed because again, I spelled out a little bit better, the deliverables, what I want. And
Mhm.
it started really breaking down better. So it went through biological pathogen bacteria such as we would write up, Brian,
Right.
Salmonella, Listeria, Escherichia coli, chemical hazards, cleaning, sanitizers. It included allergens this time, because
Nice.
a chemical hazard for dairy is the allergen itself,
Mhm.
especially if you're switching back and forth between,
Yeah. Soy
yeah,
milk or yeah.
yeah, exactly. So, and then the physical hazards, and then radiological. So it finally pulled in the radiological side because again, that's something that we have to analyze.
Yeah.
It actually spelled out, okay, here's the control measure, biological, the time temperature correlation out of the PMO from that aspect. Um Regular testing, chemical hazards, approved cleaning and sanitizing, physical hazards, implementing metal detector and sieves at critical points in the process.
Mhm.
Radiological, there's not a concern, which is yes and no. It depends on which part of the country you're in.
Yeah.
If you're in New Mexico, where they did all the nuclear testing out there,
Yeah, maybe a
what's your
little
number
bit.
one
Yeah.
source of radiological? It'd be water, right? So actually, you have to include that out there. So,
Right.
and you do radiological testing on your incoming water in New Mexico and those regions.
Yeah.
Then you have your
Yeah, just
monitoring.
yeah, a little interesting fact on that. In the mountains here in Colorado, if you have a home, a lot of times they need to have special filters to remove uranium from the water.
Oh, that's because they store all that
Well,
stuff up that way.
it's just natural in the
Oh,
rock
natural. Okay.
structure of the mountains. And now, so I had a friend that this occurred to. So you have these filters that remove the uranium, radioactive radiation particles, these little particles of uranium from the water in a filter. Well, now you are concentrating the uranium in
Oh,
the filter.
wow.
Now what do you do with the filter, right? It's a sticky situation for sure. Sorry, it just popped
No,
in my head.
that's a good discussion because
Yeah.
we use filters in the industry also for bacteria.
Mhm.
And so what kind of bacterial hazards while you're removing those filters and all that stuff? No, that's a great question.
Yeah.
That rolling some stuff around in my head. Sorry about that. So
We're
again,
easily distracted. Yeah. Squirrel.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, squirrel, exactly. No, no, but it was pretty interesting. And then references FSMA regulations, PMO,
Nice.
GMPs. So and then I told it to get more scientific. So I said, develop a scientific complex HARP C hazard. So
Ooh.
I'm trying to tease it out as far as I can get it to say, okay, let's see how far we can get this. So now it really got more prescriptive as the descriptors and everything it's looking at. So this is more what I was looking for originally, but again, I had to learn how to get there, right?
Yeah.
So it's just learning how do we follow the process.
That was an important point you just made there, Neil. I want to make sure everybody heard that. You're teaching it, but it's teaching you,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. I'm
Right.
learning just as much as it's learning, and
Yeah.
so and it because I have the knowledge. I know I've written tons of HACCP plans
Yeah.
and all of this for the dairy industry. It's like, okay, I need to get it to a certain point, and I finally started getting it to a certain point by adding the scientifically complex. So it was
Mhm.
interesting, how long did it take me to get here? It took me 3 questions, but it's just that evolution of how do I get to where I needed to be to
So,
get
so
to
it,
a good point.
yeah. So it's kind of like having a super smart person who takes everything literally. What you say is what you're going to get.
Yep.
It's kind of like those movies we used to see where somebody gets 3 wishes from a genie, and what you wish for is exactly what that genie is going to give you. And in those stories, every single time, it's exactly opposite of what the person was going for. Right.
Yep.
Same thing here. Right? So, like those old programming sayings, right? Garbage in, garbage out.
So if you go back to our original part of the discussion, is like, my fear is somebody could use this in the wrong manner, especially if they don't have the knowledge and then they rely on it. So if somebody took the first one that I did, the very first question I did for a HACCP plan,
Yeah.
it would given them, kind of a an elementary school level HACCP plan, barely,
Mm.
almost kindergarten level. And then we took it to like a junior high level, and then we took it to the collegiate level. So it's really, but would they know they need to do that because they don't have the expertise, right? I know
Oh,
what
that's a
I'm
good
looking
point.
for, so I'm trying to push it as far as I can get it out to say, okay, now I'm getting to a point where I think this is pretty well done. Now I can copy it out, take it over, and now start putting my touches to it and finishing off the last 40% or whatever from that aspect. So
No, that's a good point. So you have to be an expert in order to get the information to that level of expertise. And so it'd be like asking, to your point earlier. So a kindergartner, ask a kindergartner to explain the stars. Right? Oh, stars are twinkly, pretty things. Okay, right now talk with a high school student. Oh, well, stars are this and that. Now talk to an astronomer. Right?
yeah,
You're going to get
exactly.
very different answers.
So now we went into like supply supporting data for pasteurization temperatures used for the HARP-C plan for fluid milk HTST. And it said certainly here's some supporting, but again, it's not really detailed. It just says FDA, the PMO. There is some scientific, like they did give one published article out here for listeria
Oh.
with pasteurization. So you can start finding some of those supportive data that you can use as part of your plan and
Mhm.
start building out your knowledge base on that. So
Well, how does this work as a strategy then, Neil? This kind of got me thinking here. So one of the things that for the food safety plans I review, part of the big thing, and FDA really zones on this now too, is your supporting documentation. Okay, well, you say that salmonella is a hazard within your product. How do you know that? Right? And
right.
FDA is looking for that supporting documentation. So you could probably segment your approach on this to your point to, okay, I want to create a food safety plan, a large abstract project versus zoning in and asking Chat GPT, can you provide me reference material relative to E. coli 0157 hemorrhagic varieties that are prevalent in milk in the United States, right?
Yep.
And get
Yep.
those reference materials that you can then use to support your plan.
Yeah. Let it comb the internet for you,
Yeah.
so you don't have to spend the time combing the internet. And so,
Awesome.
yeah, so it was pretty neat from that aspect. I even went to the point of let's see here.
See, yeah,
even tells you how to search on the internet. So it says
oh,
go out to Google search and start searching this way.
bingo.
Industry journals, government, FDA review articles. Um, Develop a flow chart for a process, fluid processing plant, and you can actually copy. It gave me a copy. I just copy this out and put it right into a Word document, and then you can start playing with it from there.
Beautiful.
Again, it's a written flow chart. It's not the typical flow chart like a diagram like we would see, but you can take this and convert it to a diagram. But the
Yeah.
one thing I've always liked in like HACCP plans I do is I actually will write down each step and then what happens in that step. Because
Mhm.
when I leave, or if I'm gone, or God forbid I die tomorrow, I want them to understand, okay, well, in raw milk, this is boom, this is everything that happens in the raw milk step,
Yeah.
filtration, whatever, each of these steps, what's happening. So then somebody can literally pick up the plan and go.
Love it.
Uh,
So I'm putting it here in the chat. So this address, so chat.openai.com. Is there any cost associated with this, Neil? Can people just go out and use this, or is it for,
it's
do you have to pay?
absolutely free. It's free. They do have upgraded plans down here, and
Hmm.
I don't use them. I just use the free.
Nice.
And again, on stuff I know, I've been able to tease it out to a pretty good level of what I want it to tell me, and
Hmm.
then I just take it from there. So, um, no,
Yeah, guys.
it's been fun to play with. I even had it to write a validation program for validating CIP. So it's like, what's a core base? Now it came out with a very generic valid. It's like, okay, here's the process, but then you got to fill in all the stuff, right? But
Right.
again, it set up a nice template for me to start where I'm not having to start from scratch.
Mhm.
So, but then again, it's building it from there.
Gotcha. So Annie, thank you very much for that question. You couldn't have set it up better for us. We appreciate that. Um, so Sean had a good thing here, and I think this is kind of what we were talking about before as well. I'm someone trying to find the right program, right, to sort through my internal audits and develop the top hotspots per site. And I think that's a really good example of what Sean's bringing up here is, again, how can we use this data in our plant operations? So we were talking about analyzing complaints, uh, internal audits. Oh my goodness, yeah. So any type of time you have all this data that you can look at. Other examples I was thinking of is pest control.
Yep.
What type of trends are you seeing in pest control? What type of insects are you getting? What type of seasonality are you getting? Are you seeing decreases in effectiveness with different type of baits? These type of activities around pest control. Maintenance. Oh, huge, huge. And we talked about this on the chat previously. Amazing advancements in AI relative to preventive maintenance, which
Well,
is moving now to predictive maintenance.
thank you for saying that because we have to go to predictive maintenance in the industry. We have to. The
Yeah.
demand for the quality and the safety of our product. People are wanting to extend shelf life. They're wanting all these different things. There's no way we're going to be able to achieve that with preventive maintenance, which we all know failed anyways. I mean,
Yeah.
which plants do you go into and they've actually succeeded at preventative maintenance? They no. But
Right.
when you sit down and again you start combing, what are there? So we learned HACCP from who? Right? We learned it from NASA. We learned it from Pillsbury, and so on and so forth. Some gurus who got together. But actually, if you take HACCP even further back, it actually started in World War II,
Yeah.
and then that's where the basis of HACCP was developed. So the FMEA and all that process, which is the core of it. So what are some new things? So like if you start looking at preventative maintenance, so why are we failing? What's happening? What's the problem with that? And you start looking at what's NASA doing, what's the airline industry doing, um, and they're all transitioning over. They've transitioned years ago to predictive because again,
Uh-huh.
you want to fix a plane while it's on the ground. You don't want to have a ship going up to the moon,
Yeah.
that's going to break down on its trip up. So it's all predictive. And so we have to transition. And even the medical industry, medical side, has really transitioned over predictive. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of new work being done on that, new tools where it's putting again out a lot of data. But then how is that data analyzed? And if you're
Right.
going to rely on somebody to sit there and look at a computer and do all that analysis, you've already failed. So it's
Mhm.
these AI programs coming in to do all that for you.
Right. Pretty much as I'm thinking through different examples in a production facility, more and more come to mind, and really I have a hard time not thinking of somewhere where AI would be applied. So production scheduling,
Yep.
using predictive analysis and production scheduling to figure out what you should actually be making in the plant to meet orders versus what the sales guy is telling you, right? Because that's generally how it's gone in the past is, oh, we got a big special coming up at Kroger. We need to make tons and tons of inventory. And then it doesn't quite go the way that you thought, and you're sitting all this old inventory that's expiring and going out of code. Ordering raw materials we were talking about with procurement. So procurement's out there looking at market trends and when's the right time to buy. Great. How much material should you actually have in your plant to meet those orders?
Yeah.
Safety, OSHA in the plants. Where are to the point that Sean was talking here about hotspots? What are the hotspots in your plant for risk? Where have you seen potential lockout tagout failures or failures with people driving around like maniacs on forklifts? But they never do that, right? These type of things. What are the trends in the industry overall for these things?
But the first problem we have in the industry, and I'll say this because as being a consultant, and even with my previous careers, a lot of the work I've done is consulting, even with the other companies and stuff like that. I've been able to go into tons of plants. I mean, I've been in hundreds of food processing plants and worked with a lot of different companies. The first problem we have is we still have to digitize data. There's still a huge mass of food plants out there on handwritten data. They don't even have it in Excel. It blows my mind. I was at this is a multi-billion-dollar company I was at, and they had a micro issue. I said, I need to see your micro. And when they sat down, they said, for us to compile all that you've asked for, it's going to take us about 3 weeks. I was like, this is ridiculous, because it was all still handwritten. They're like, we're going to have to get somebody to come in and draft it all over to exactly what you want. And I'm like, this is crazy. So
Right.
it blows my mind how many plants are still on handwritten data.
Yeah.
And if you're going to come into the modern times, you have to digitize data.
Right.
So that's the
So,
first step.
yeah. I mean, if FDA comes into your plant and there's a food safety issue and they're looking at a potential recall for your product and they ask for information relative to your food safety plan, number one, they have a legal right to that documentation, and you have to supply it in 24 hours. That company would be in a world of hurt.
Oh, massive world of hurt. And the problem is that company, and I know them, they're still the same right now. And I'm like, you guys, but they're not the only ones. A lot of companies are still on paper. It blows my mind.
Yeah.
And so that's the first, even if you get over to Excel, at least in Excel, now we've got AI functions we can import into Excel now that we're learning. So it's like, you got to digitize the data somehow,
Right.
because we have to be able to analyze it.
Right. And recently here too, right? So I think one of the key lessons coming out of our chat here today too, Neil, is we need to, just like the AI, in that if you only tell it to do a particular thing, that's all it's going to do. We have been trained as food safety professionals to only look at our domain. So our plants and everything that directly impacts that, one forward and one back, right? That's been drilled into our heads forever.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now look at enhanced traceability.
Yeah.
That's coming fast, right? So
Yep.
2026, it's going to be live 2027. Oh, we got plenty of time. No, we do not. This is a perfect example of what FDA is pushing us toward in the food industry is you need to be looking at this as the overall process. We want to be able to go back through those systems. And this is where AI is going to come into play then, is so if FDA says, because they're doing this too, they're going to be analyzing information in AI. And CDC is going to be looking at trends. And they then started investigating things at the retail level, and then they initiate a recall and tracking that back through. That's going to come back to you as the key manufacturer, right? The key data guy within that process. They're coming directly to you. FDA is also going to be looking at it from a consumer standpoint. I mean, they're already doing this with whole genome sequencing and tracking clusters of illnesses. That's only going to enhance.
Well, and it recalls, and you hit one point for me, is it's ridiculous, and I'm really excited the work that's being done on traceability because of recalls. It's unacceptable, like the PCA situation. It took us 3 years almost to tease out everywhere that stuff went. And people are getting sick in the meantime. And the industry sits down and goes, why is the government doing this? Why is the government doing that? Well, we've done it to ourselves.
Yeah.
If you're choosing not to digitize your data, if you're choosing not to utilize your data, you've done it to yourselves, and you're hurting the whole industry actually,
Right.
because all it takes is for you to have a recall now. And again, it doesn't make a difference which segment of the industry you're in, milk, fresh vegetables, whatever, meat, whatever. Any food safety incident is bad for all, because it just brings more government looking down at the industry and saying, "What are you guys doing?" And of course, what are they going to do? I mean, when FSMA first came out, I said, "We're at fault for FSMA. We did it to ourselves in
Yeah.
the industry. We kept pushing and pushing and pushing the envelope to how much profit we could make versus the safety of the product we were putting out." And yes, I want people to make profits. I own a business myself. You got to make profits. Nothing wrong with that. I never want to say, but there's also a point of safety is not something you can overstep
Right.
for a profit, because if it's to that point, then shut down. You're done. So, um,
Well, and now we're full circle back to the introduction to our chat, which is why are recalls so high?
yeah,
So odds are, thanks to what we're talking about right now, recalls are probably going to go up, right? Which is
oh,
going to initiate a reaction from regulatory
yep.
to drive that back down. The consumers are going to lose confidence.
Hmm.
So it's not a matter of if you want to do this, it's you need to do this, right? You
Yeah,
need to be ahead of the curve.
it's not an if, it's
And
a when.
yeah, it's going to happen.
Absolutely.
Now imagine in the future, FDA is looking at predictive analysis and coming to your company and saying, we're seeing a trend in your industry relative to consumer complaints and illness reports in the marketplace through these different avenues that we're getting. We think you're at risk in the
Hmm.
future for an issue. We
And
want to come in and do an audit.
the FDA is hiring predictive analytic scientists
Mhm.
with food science knowledge. I know some of them, and
Yeah,
it's mind blowing what they can do with data. I
yeah,
mean, these are the next level. Like, wow, I don't actually I don't know if my brain could even handle it, but it's just like what
yeah,
they can do with data and what they're predicting. It's I'm working with one segment right now, and they're like, all of a sudden, the FDA is coming in a lot more, and I'm like, well, yeah, because if you actually take a step back and look at the risks that are happening in your segment right now, it's becoming a high risk segment,
mhm,
and so the FDA is noticing that. So yeah, they're
yeah.
definitely looking at all that. So
Well, and we saw recently with the issue with the contaminated cinnamon with lead,
yeah,
which the latest I saw is that this was deliberate and they were deliberately adding lead to the cinnamon. And FDA proactively went out and began sampling product in the marketplace with cinnamon, found about a 20% failure rate on what they sampled, which was only 75 different products from different companies, which is pretty small,
hmm,
and told those companies to recall.
yep. Well, you remember the cumin, right? The
Yeah,
cumin incidents with the
with the
peanut
peanut.
shells. Yeah.
Yeah,
That, well, to them it wasn't an allergen, and they weren't thinking about it. It was coming from a third world country, but
right.
still, again, it's a situation like that. So,
Yeah.
but
So, man, this is an amazing topic, and I know we could keep going on this, but let's bring this back up to the 30,000-foot level, Neil.
you said this was
And,
going to go by fast. I just looked at the
uh,
time. I'm like,
it,
wow,
it,
this whole hour's
it's
gone.
amazing, isn't it? Um, so tons to think about here, and I'm sure everybody who's on the chat with us here today, and wheels are spinning. What do you want to leave people with here today on next steps? Because it's always one step at a time. So what would you recommend is the next step for people?
Yeah, really, first, make sure you digitize the data, number one. That's
Mm,
step number one. Anything that you do, you're going to have to do that. But when you start utilizing AI, don't expect it to be the expert, and you have to really kind of know what you're talking about, to get it to where, as you saw today, for me to tease it down to where it was actually putting out something that was useful.
right.
So, there's a lot of people on here that I know their names. I know they're very smart. So it takes that time to play with it, have fun with it. You're not going to break anything, so
Mm,
just have fun. Act like a kid again. That's where I sit down with me and my daughters, and we just have fun with it. And what can we have it do for us? So, and then next thing you know, just by adding the scientific complex part to the question, all of a sudden changed everything that started coming out of it. Yeah, I was still asking this exact same question, but added those two words, and all of a sudden, what came out of it was immensely better than what it was first putting out. So
nice.
just play and have fun, because it's not going to go away. You have to learn how to accept it, how to understand it, um, and move from there.
right? Just like everything else in life, if you don't keep up, it's going to pass you by. So,
Oh, yeah. Very good.
yeah. So with that, guys, and so thank you, everybody. And as we talked about investing in our industry and investing and learning and creating new things, everybody here's on this chat, you're doing that, right? So you're out there, you're in the top 5% of people who are out there actively growing and learning and improving food safety. Thank you. We really appreciate that. And then we know, Neil and I know, that investing an hour of your time out of the week is significant, right? It's a lot of time. And hopefully we've been able to provide you some value here today and some things to think about over the weekend as well when you start your new work week. So with that, guys, we'll bring the chat to a close for this week. Fantastic chat, really enjoyable. And of course, we'll be back here next week at the same time. So 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern. And again, we live stream on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. So please join us next week, and I'll have another kick butt executive expert like Neil on to talk with us as well. So in the meantime, kick back a little bit, think about what we talked about, and enjoy your weekend. So we'll see you back here next week. And thanks again, Neil. Really appreciate your insights here today.
Thank you very much for the invite, and thank you all for joining. Appreciate everything that you guys do.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.